Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. We're back for another preview podcast, and today we're going to be looking ahead to Sunderland's championship match against Sheffield Wednesday on Friday night. So to preview the game, joining myself, Joe Nicholson, we are joined by Alex Miller from the Sheffield Star. Alex, how are you feeling ahead of Friday's game at Hillsborough?
Personally, fine and dandy. Thanks, Joe. From a football point of view, fair bit of trepidation. It's fair to say, and I'm sure most of the listeners will already be well aware of the struggles that Wednesday have faced on their return to the Championship. And in a nutshell, it's all pretty miserable at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you mentioned there, Sheffield Wednesday really struggling this season. They're the only team in the league without a win, 2 points in their first 8 games. And for a team that won promotion via the playoffs, had that extraordinary comeback against Peterborough in the semi-final and then got promoted at Wembley, beating Barnsley, it kind of feels like that bubble has been burst. Is there any kind of optimism left from that promotion last season?
I'd love to be able to say yes, and if there was something to cling to, I'd be doing so in my columns and certainly in this chat today. But no, I mean the bubble has well and truly been burst. It's a little over or approaching, I think, 4 months since Wembley, and I've never seen in any sport sort of such an opportunity missed in terms of the way that Sheffield Wednesday got promoted. The manner of the comeback in the playoff semi-final, and then with the last, not kick of the game, it was a header, but the last moment of the final to go up against local rivals and all the rest of it. Obviously, Darren Moore, 3 weeks on, left the club, which has been a long and sprawling saga played out in public between, particularly from the chairman, but Darren said his piece as well. Huge squad turnover. Cisco Munoz has come in, the former Watford manager who won promotion with them. It's been a catalogue of PR gaffes and mistakes, and sadly at the minute that's playing out on the pitch as well.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is a lot of frustration among the fan base. There were protests the game against Middlesbrough recently, and I was reading that some of the fans were chanting for Munoz to be sacked after their 3-0 defeat against Swansea last time out. But how would you describe how they have played on the pitch under Munoz? Because it seems like the fans also not happy with his style of play as well as the results.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think anyone that sort of saw Darren Moore's Wednesday certainly for the second half of last season will have seen a very sort of more direct approach, feeding into the hold-up abilities of Michael Smith and Lee Gregory, and it was a squad that ended up sort of set up for that style of play. Now, a lot of debate over whether that can work in the Championship, certainly in terms of the sort of ambitions that the chairman had spoken about in the summer. He mentioned while he recognised it'd be tough, he would like a stab at the playoffs, which surprised an awful lot of people and didn't seem all that realistic to the vast majority. So there has been this shift to an attacking style of play in terms of getting the ball down, playing from the back, trying to play through the lines. Barry Bannon, obviously a central figure for many years now for Wednesday, was played in a different position. He was stationed a lot higher and sort of battling his instincts to run deep and get the ball and sort of play that with that sort of quarterback energy. And that's been reverted now. They've moved from four at a back to a back three. It all just feels a little bit disjointed. The players, 8 matches in, 10 matches in total, competitively this season, don't look all that comfortable with what they're being asked to do. But every player we speak to seems to say, in training and in moments of matches, it is starting to show green shoots. I would argue that those have been all too fleeting. They've put together good halves. They were the better team for the first half an hour, certainly at Swansea at the weekend. They were very good in the first half against Middlesbrough, in the defeat against Preston. But yeah, in terms of that 90-minute performance, they look a long way off it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you spoke to some of the players, and Barry Bannon and Isco Munoz spoke to the press yesterday, and Munoz was asked about those chances for him to be sacked as well. So what did those two have to say? And obviously it's a huge game coming up at Hillsborough against Sunderland on Friday.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think Xisco was very... he can be a spiky character in press conferences, and he sort of fights his corner. And that's been interpreted in sort of different ways, certainly from the outside. But they are continuing to bang the drum for patience and the need for the fans to get on side, because it can be a powerful thing. We saw that in the last couple of seasons. Hillsborough, when things are going well, is a very intimidating place for opposition teams to come. The flip side of that is that it can be tricky. There's a lot of pressure on a club of Wednesday's size, and the 3 decades of hurt now that Wednesday fans feel that they've had. So, Barry Bannon was very passionate, and I felt very earnest and genuine in his defence of Xisco Munoz, who has been in for a lot of criticism since he started at the club, and continues to do so. And Barry's argument was that the players needed to start standing up and doing their bit, taking responsibility. They can't duck and dive and allow the frustration being aimed at the dugout and the boardroom to deviate from what they're trying to do. So, yeah, it's a time of unrest at Wednesday. I certainly agree with a lot of what Barry said on that point. There were a lot of senior players. Not easy for them. I think 8 of the players that started, possibly 9 at Swansea, weren't at the club last season. So they really are going from a standing start and trying to get things going with what's been a much changed side and outfit.
As you said, the atmosphere at Hillsborough can make it an intimidating place to be. Sunderland found that in the playoffs a couple of years ago, although they did manage to just scrape through that tie. But what do you think the atmosphere will be like going into Friday's game? I suppose it will probably depend on how Wednesday start the game, on whether the fans really get behind the side or perhaps turn. And there were some protests in that Middlesbrough game. Yeah,
well, there are protests planned again.
Right.
A black balloon protest, which we've seen at other clubs at various stages. So, yeah, look, it's I think a lot will and always does ride on sort of the first 15, 20 minutes. When things aren't going well, it's not just Wednesday by any stretch. When managers and teams are under pressure, that how they start the game is very, very important. But it'd be interesting. The planned protest. There's also a planned gathering outside the South Stand after the match. And yeah, something I would like to mention is that a big Wednesday fan that is well known, home and away and abroad and all the rest of it. 28 years old, sadly died over the weekend. And there is a planned applause in the 28th minute for Liam Rogers, who was a recognisable figure. So, I mean, some Sunderland fans might recognise him. He was 6'5", big unit, and a lovely character. So that's something that if the Sunderland fans would like to get involved in, that would be a nice touch. I think there's also a planned minute's applause for Maddie Cusack, the Sheffield United player who died last week. So there'll be plenty going on in the terraces throughout the evening. I guess the hope is from a Wednesday perspective that they can finally put together a performance and, God hope, and get a first win.
I'm sure that both sets of fans will join in with those tributes. But just on the pitch, as you mentioned, looks like Wednesday switched to a back 3. I was just looking at the possession stats in the Championship. So Wednesday, the 3rd lowest behind QPR and Rotherham. So with being at home, perhaps a bit more kind of, if the fans will expect them to maybe get on the front foot a little bit more. But how do you think they will set up against Sunderland in terms of the system and just how they'll approach the game?
It's been a bit of a fool's errand, sort of second guessing how things will set up, certainly in terms of selection and that sort of thing. Certainly in the early stages against matches against Southampton, Preston, that there was a clear effort to sort of sit deep and sort of hit on the break a bit more. While Wednesday aren't creating a great deal going forward, obviously that becomes a great frustration. And clearly, the results will show that they haven't had much joy with it. I would be inclined to say that would be the way that they go. That they've been playing a sort of hybrid. I think we've been calling it a 3-4-2-1 formation, which sounds like a Christmas tree, but it doesn't really play out that way. With sort of two advanced midfielders behind a lone striker. The issue is that the lone striker has just been completely isolated for the majority of play this season. I'm not painting a hugely positive picture. I'm very aware of at the minute, but like I say, there's not too much to cling on to at the minute.
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, there's been a lot of change in the players over the summer, but there is still a team that won promotion last season and will have some match winners in it. So who are the key players that Sunderland will have to watch out for in the Sheffield Wednesday side?
I mean, always Barry Bannon, who I think more or less every EFL fan will have an appreciation for his ability, when he's on his game and when he's striking hot. There aren't many better in the entire league. That remains the case, despite the fact he's 33. He has had he's had a long-going injury issue. He's taken injections to get through games and that sort of thing. This season, he spoke about the fact that his form hasn't been where he'd like it to be. But he does tend to turn up when the Sky cameras are there. There's a nice little statistic about the number of man of the matches he's been handed by Sky pundits over the years. So he's certainly one that I would watch. The other one who Sunderland fans won't be as familiar with is Anthony Masaba, who he's a young Dutch winger. I'll describe him as he's sort of playing a bit inverted as one of those attacking midfielders behind the striker. And he has shown glimpses of being a player that can sort of get you off your feet, to use that old cliche. He sort of runs up players. He's got a trick or two. There are, in these very, very early stages of his Wednesday career, one or two question marks about his final product, his final ball. But if he can get that going, there's little doubt that he can be a very dangerous player in this division.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of injuries, I think Munoz said there was no kind of fresh injuries, but potentially Malik Wilkes could come back in. Is that what was kind of suggested?
Yeah, sort of. I think it'll be a period of waiting on Malik. It's been suggested that he's going to play. I think he's played one game in the under-21 so far. Mm-hmm. He's back training with the first team and seems to be quite involved there. I wouldn't expect him to start. Whether he's seen as someone that can provide a bit of an X factor from the bench, perhaps this could be the week for it. But my instinct would be that it might be a game or two too early for him to come back into the frame.
Mm-hmm. And just on Sunderland, have you seen much of them this season, and how do you think they'll match up against Sheffield Wednesday? Yeah,
bits and bobs. They just seem to be quite a good attacking outfit, don't they? Obviously, the defeat at Cardiff was a little bit of a surprise, I'd suggest. But Tony Mowbray just strikes me as a very canny operator. Obviously knows the division like the back of his hand and speaks very well as well. There's been a few back and forth with Wednesday and Sunderland over the last few years. I would point out, you mentioned the playoff defeat. I think we can all agree that Wednesday very much avenged that with the Carabao Cup win last season.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look back at, I think the season of the playoffs, Wednesday won 3-0 at Hillsborough, Sunderland won 5-0 at the Stadium of Light. There really have been some really interesting talking points in terms of the recent history of two very, very big football clubs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two obviously very well supported teams, and that's the reason why Sky have chosen it, haven't they, for their Friday night game to be televised.
Yeah, I think they'll have plenty of talking points. I mean, there's a point to be made about the way that the two clubs have managed to adapt to life back in the Championship, having been in League One, and Sunderland can obviously be hugely commended with that. I don't think anyone will doubt that they're set up to challenge again, as they did last season. And Wednesday, it's been a bit of a masterclass in how not to build on that success. So, contrasting fortunes.
Mm-hmm. Well, just before we let you go, Alex, we usually just finish by asking our guests just for a quick score prediction. How do you think the game is going to go on Friday night?
7-0 Wednesday.
7-0 Wednesday. Well, we had a 5-0 and a 3-0, didn't we, 2 seasons ago?
No, I think it would take several seasons at the minute for Wednesday to score 7 goals. I'll be optimistic. I'll go for a tight 1-0 Wednesday win. As I say, there have been little glimmers, sort of half an hour pieces here and there. I think it's got to the stage now where you're asking, the players and management to respond. And there's been a lot of talk about getting the fans back on side, but it's the players and results that can do that ultimately.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like Wednesday might hope for that, and Sunderland showed against Cardiff maybe a little bit of vulnerables from set pieces, so maybe Wednesday could capitalise on that. But I just think Sunderland will bounce back after the game against Cardiff. They'd had 3 wins in a row before that. I thought they played well in the Cardiff game, but were unlucky to concede from a set piece. So I'll go for 2-0 to Sunderland, but we'll see how it plays out on Friday. Alex, thanks a lot for joining us on the latest episode of the Raw podcast. And if you like what we do here at the Raw podcast, you can consider subscribing on our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And for the latest SAFC news, you can head over to the SAFC section of the Sunderland Echo website. Tony Mowbray spoke to the media on Thursday, so you can find his thoughts over on the website, as well as more build-up to Friday's match. And then we'll have live updates and analysis from Hillsborough as Sunderland take on Sheffield Wednesday on Friday. So once again, thanks again so much for listening to the Raw podcast.